Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GCS Connect Leaders series. We're into 2023 now. This was recorded in Christmas 22, the cold spell of in Britain in 2022. But we were speaking to JaJuan Smart of Maktub Limitless. He was out in Austin, so he was warming us up, and it was a great conversation around DEI and the work that he's doing with a people first strategy. So without further ado, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. It's JaJuan Smart. Juan, hi, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. And yourself?
I'm very well, very well, yes. It's just coming up to Christmas now. You're in Texas. I'm in shivering in the UK at the moment. So it's good to speak to you and good to kind of have you on board for our Leaders series. I know that you've been involved with some of our diversity programs up to now. So Betty mentioned that it would be great to kind of have you on the show, as it were. So I'm sure it'll be a great conversation. So just for our listeners, we've got JaJuan Smart here from Maktub Limitless. He's the CEO and founder of this organization. It is an organization that consults around DEI, but it looks at it with a business from a person first, an individual first strategy. So that I think the right word would be winning hearts and minds of the people within an organization. I guess, JaJuan, you found that allows you to really kind of build much more kind of transformation and cultural change within the workplace, rather than it being kind of a box ticking exercise or something that doesn't get the whole kind of buy-in from the whole organization. And I think and that's something that we found really interesting when we've spoken to yourself. But I'm sure you'll be able to introduce what Maktub does even best, and maybe even tell us what Maktub means, because I think that's a good story as well. So we might even start with that one there.
Well, David, how can I follow that up? You did a great job of introducing it. But first of all, it's amazing to be here. Thank you for having me on the show and giving me the opportunity to share my perspective on leadership and how it impacted me and how it continues to forge forward in my life. But when it comes to Maktub Limitless, the journey began, I like to say, a long time ago. I won't give you all the nitty gritty details of how I came up and everything that, everything that transpired. But what I will say is that leadership or the journey for DEI has always been prevalent, and that starts with introspection. But for Maktub, it really started and launched off in 2020, when it was a time when a lot of things were going on. As we know, COVID struck. There was a lot of social unrest. And during that time, I began to understand how not only things in society impacts us from an individual standpoint or from a certain group or identity where they may feel the effects more, but how those societal things impact us in our life also affect us in our workplace. You can't nobody's a robot. Nobody can just cut off what they have in their personal life and how things are affected for them and then go over and just have a glorious work day. It may happen from time to time. There are exceptions, but most of us really feel and that impacts us. So beginning that thought and going off that sentiment, I began to be approached as the diversity working group chairperson for the company I worked at during that time. I really ingratiated myself in everything diversity, equity, inclusion, began getting certifications in different certifications in different for diversity and inclusion, getting ADR certifications, alternative dispute resolution. So that way, when we have these difficult conversations, I'll have the ability and the know-how in order to kind of navigate the conversation to where it can be more amenable. People can actively listen to each other, be mindful, be present in the conversation and everything else. But once I did that, I knew what I fell in love with. And I was really helping people, really serving people for greater purpose. And so I started Maktub Limitless in 2020, and we've been growing ever since, helping many industries, agriculture, technology, um, healthcare, group homes, you name it, because diversity, equity, and inclusion is in everything that we do and everywhere. So we're just focused on serving our humanity in a really uplifting way to where we can really connect with each other like the purpose of DEI is and create those opportunities for growth and development.
That's really, really interesting. And for me, what I found quite kind of interesting there is, obviously you've had, and we'll talk about this, you've had some some other careers. Obviously, you've been highly successful in the military. You're highly successful in commercial technology itself. So when you say you
Mhm.
really kind of found yourself, was that the first time you felt you'd really found this is really what I want to do, or was this another time? Do you think?
Well, as a kid, you always want to play professional sports, but the odds of that is very rare. So that's the,
Yeah.
this is the only other time that I felt that passion where I felt like I
Mm.
knew what I was here to do from that standpoint, from a professional standpoint. And so everything else was, you learn the craft, you ingratiate yourself in it, you give it your all. That's part of our core values
Mm.
coming from the military is excellence in all we do, and something that I adamantly feel we can achieve as human beings, with DEI being a way forward to achieve that. But nevertheless, it was definitely something that uh, I really gravitated to, that I really felt impassioned about, and I haven't
Mm.
felt that way since childhood. And that's when I talk about it, I feel like a child sometimes because I have that joy and that passion for it, and it burns deeply.
Do you think that's, as you talked about, the kind of social upheaval and so many different changes that were happening around that time in so many
Mhm.
different things, you know, and I think that made everyone kind of reassess like where they were at with everything, in terms of family, in terms of culture, in terms of society. And do you think
Mhm.
that kind of that lockdown moment, where you really had we all had to kind of reassess values and reassess where we're at. Do you think that was a real kind of leader in for you into to thinking about this?
Yeah, so it was always things that I've been uh, or I've observed with over my
Mm.
lifetime, and I always was a type of person that always wanted to do what was right, stand up um, in the face of any kind of inequities, whether that's somebody getting bullied or whether that's somebody not being treated fairly at work or within my friend group or whatever it was. So
Mm.
having that time to sit down and reflect and being introspective for myself, because it's really a skill that people have to learn, because not everyone during that time, to be honest, and let's be honest, everybody during that time didn't reflect, because it all depends on your environment and who you surround
Mm.
yourself with. Do you expand yourself from a multicultural standpoint, or are you continuing to sit and do the same things that you've been doing, watching the same news channels, um, intaking the same sources and contents, not looking at opposing views, things of that nature. So, again, a lot of us may have reflected, but I won't say all of us. And that's with everything, it's balancing everything, give and flow. But with that being said, for me, it was a time for me to reflect. It was a time for me to sit down and really see how I can make a difference, because I'm not the most boisterous on social media platforms or anything else, because
Mm.
everyone has an opinion. Doesn't mean it's not valid, but everyone has an opinion. And I just choose to do things in a way that best fits me, and that I feel like I can give the best of my version of myself. And for me,
Yeah.
that was in the workplace. How can I impact the workplace to where we can have multicultural views, where we can have the psychological safety that really makes us feel comfortable in our environments, give us that sense of value and sense of belonging for being authentically who we truly are. And so that's where I felt like I could make the biggest impact. And actually, absolutely sitting down, seeing everything transpire is really what inspired me to take action in this regard.
Fantastic. And obviously, one of the things you mentioned there was the different industries that you work with, and how you
Mhm.
bring that people first strategy, the kind of the ideology, as it were, of Maktub to these different industries. And you mentioned like agriculture there, and you mentioned kind of technology, and obviously very different industries with very different drivers. Do you find different challenges as you come into, like, I mean, I don't know if we're talking about agribusiness here or a farm, or what the difference is, or if
Yeah,
it's kind of food production. Do you find different challenges, different drivers when you look at different types of industries, or is it generally the same? Like people's issues and problems of working together and creating a diverse workforce is basically the same wherever you go.
that's a great question. And to answer it, I would say it's kind of both ways. Where logistically, a lot of the things are different. You're dealing with
Yeah.
tech when you're talking about technology, as far as computers and networks and security and all these different types of fields within IT. But when you're talking about agriculture per se, then you're talking about the different water sources and the maybe the lack of diversity in as far as populace and who's getting the education as far as agrarian lifestyles. So these are different logistics, but what I find is organizationally, it's a lot of it is synonymous with each other. There's not enough different recruiting avenues or sites or sources that are sought to get those diverse candidates. A lot of groupthink sits in when the smallest voice in the room doesn't have an opportunity to really express or be able to, implement their ideals or get them out to the rest of the group. So it's a lot of different things. It's a lot of different things that are the same within the organizational standpoint, but when you get into the actual career and the diversity of the fields, then that's where it becomes different, and you have to adjust and customize what you're doing in order to meet that audience, as opposed to maybe the audience that's in healthcare or different industries.
And you talk there about, when we set off this kind of person first, and obviously I guess that means by
Mhm.
kind of getting this message through to every single level of the organization. Like you can't just sit in front of the board and say, right, you need to do things differently. You need to buy everybody within the organization in. And how do you kind of go about that? How do you take that holistic approach? Is that really by kind of walking the halls, looking at every single different type of role and assessing that?
Yeah, so it depends on what the organization wants. It depends on what the organization needs as far as what we'll supply as a contracting or consulting or firm. But when it comes to our approach and how we see the best practice would be for us to start at the individual level. Let's start with mindfulness training. Being present, being observant, or being aware with with setting your intent, being accountable, ensuring that you understand how you're feeling, and if that feeling is because of something else that transpired. Are you projecting? What are you doing? Why are you feeling the way you feel in this moment? And then lastly, being accepting isn't always tolerant. It's just accepting of the situation. Look, if Gary comes in, you go in every morning and Gary's mad, he's not a morning person. You say, hey Gary, and Gary said, yeah, and you take
I think
offense.
I know Gary. I think I
Gary's
might
like
work
this
with
every
Gary.
morning. Yeah. Gary's like this every morning.
Yeah.
But yet you're getting mad this particular morning. It's time for you to accept that this is the way Gary is, but why am I feeling this way? Did something happen at home? Did something happen on the drive? Do I have something on my mind that I'm projecting my anger to Gary, when I know Gary's just like this every morning, but Gary brightens up, or this is just who Gary is? It doesn't mean you tolerate Gary, but how do you do that? Maybe you just don't say hi to Gary that morning, but every other morning you go and continue to say hi to Gary, and he gives his grunt, and you go on about your business and you go on about your day, right?
Yeah.
But having that mindfulness intact when you're going into trying to transition into a DEI lifestyle or organization, or if you are looking to be, if you're looking to really get the well-being of your people, which is the inclusion aspect that's often overlooked. How are they feeling both physically, mentally, and emotionally? All that impacts how your organization is going to perform, how those individuals are going to perform. But with mindfulness, we can bring you to a point where when you're going into these different meetings, when you're talking about these different groups or whatnot, you're present, you're aware, you're setting out an intent to do something coming out of that meeting, whether it's just being aware and educated on different subjects, or whether it's how can I help and assist. It doesn't matter, everything in between. But and then you start rolling into the educational aspects. Okay, let's talk about psychological safety. What does that mean for us? How does that impact everyone? How does that create innovation within your organization? How does that spark those minds and get people to that may have been uncomfortable talking to now start talking, because now they feel you value them for who they are. And that begins with those interpersonal conversations and so forth and so on. But you can start the educational aspects and you build up from psychological safety to compassion or to employee engagement avenues and every other kind of educational aspect that promotes and incorporates diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then you continue to build from there. And from an educational standpoint, now you can start really implementing your different programs that promote diversity, like your ERGs, employee resource groups. You can do you can build on your committees. That way, people are there with the common purpose to really get things moving in the right direction, or understanding what DEI is and that it's for everyone, because it's oftentimes it's looked at as an attack on heterosexual white males. Period. Right? It's always seen that way, or conservative, even on top of that. And so you can understand sometimes why they feel attacked. But when you start to really break down DEI and show that it's for everybody, because that I really matters, that inclusivity aspect. Do you feel valued for who you are? Do you have a sense of belonging because of who you are? Do you feel a state of psychological safety where you can express your ideals, of course, tastefully and professionally, of course, but you can express your ideals and not have fear of reprisal or someone saying that it's not, that it's dumb or what have you. But can you really do those things within a psychologically safe environment? Those are all part of inclusivity, and you just continue to build from there.
When you think about it, it kind of almost takes you back to the professional sport idea. It shouldn't be that hard, should it? Because let's say you and I work for the same business, right? And we're not from the same ethnicity or whatever. We come from a different country and we might have different beliefs. But let's say we work for the same company, right? We both work for GCS. We both work for Maktub. That's the link, right? That's the thing that should. If you've got the culture of the company right, then we should all believe in that. And the reason I've mentioned about professional sport, that let's say, for instance, we both support the same NFL team or the same, soccer team or something like that. Or like you see in the World Cup, how much the football kind of brings the whole country together, all supporting the same teams and that sort of thing. I guess the idea really behind it all is that we can bond over our organization, right? We can believe in that organization, and that's that's a kind of, there's a binding thing between us. Even though there are differences between us, we are bound by the sports team that we support, or the really more kind of, for this conversation, the company that we work for, right? I'm assuming that links quite a lot into the kind of what you learned from the military, because I guess whoever you are within the military, you have to be on the same side, right?
Correct. And I was just thinking that when you were making your extremely valid points. When it comes to being in the military, that was one of the things that I found to be the same within the organization and the military, is that you join together for a common mission, regardless of whatever your differences are. When it comes down to working on a common purpose and forming that phalanx, then it's nothing that really, I'm not going to say that you can't do, but that team will put their efforts and their all into to really ensuring that the mission is met. A lot of times, you're going to have your people, just like in the military, you're going to have people that really don't want to be there or may have trouble adapting. And that's where I think the military has gotten better with addressing the mental health issue aspects that people have to endure. Because sometimes in these high-paced environments like tech, we know it's high-paced. You're really going because you're constantly developing. You're constantly putting out different programming language, and you're selling your products and everything else. So it's always hustle and bustle. But burnout psychologically is a psychological thing, and it's when you get burned out for something, they show that it's just as high as someone with high mental anxiety or high mental stress. So that's why you have people, maybe, it's a big job walk off right now, but addressing these different things from the inclusivity standpoint, that's what really helps. Again, everyone, not just one individual or not just a group of individuals, everyone. And so one thing that you said that I like to sum up succinctly is similarities unite us, while differences make us unique. I firmly believe that. And when you have something like a common mission, then you have that similarity and that'll unite you in some capacity. And it's up to us to really be able to start being multicultural in our thinking, because we oftentimes go back to our homes or our environments where there's more people that look and think just like us in a lot of aspects. But having that talk with your partner that may be Indian, or the one that may be African, or the one that may be the white male from my perspective, or the person that may be the black woman, whatever it is, or whoever they are, you talk to them, you start knowing, and you start understanding that, hey, you know what, we got a lot in common. Even the most uncommon people have something in common.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes more than you actually think, if you know what I mean. But I think, what really interests me about that is, I guess when it comes down to it, that what you should also not do, therefore, is just assume just because we work for the same company that it's all good. We should be self-critical Correct. Of our businesses. We should say, well, how can we improve this? Yes, we all fly the flag and say, yeah, we work for GCS, or yeah, we work for Maktub, so everything's great. But sometimes people are paying lip service to that, as you said. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people are obviously not with GCS or Maktub because everyone's super happy all the time. But it's about looking under the covers, looking under the, doing a real audit and really understanding, well, when it comes down to it, is everyone engaged? Does everyone feel included? Mm-hmm. Are we really helping diversity within our business? Because I think, the ideal is that because we're all working for the same business, we're all on the same side and we're all pushing towards the same goal. But I think unless we really do kind of challenge ourselves, then we'll never really know and we'll never really improve, will we?
Absolutely. One of the things that as leaders we can do is we can continue to assess our climate. And like you were talking about, look under the hood, make sure that, or ensure that we're not missing things that may be prevalent, that we're listening to our people, that we're doing things that can really shine the light on the gaps within our organizations, not just overlook them and continue to do business as usual, but really look under that hood. So assess our environments, assess how inclusive we're being, assess how diverse we're being. Are we equitable in our policies, our practices, our benefits, all these things? Next, what you'll do is you'll articulate what that looks like for you as a leader. All right. So for that, for me, I want people to really ingratiate them. I want the supervisors to have more interpersonal communication with with the people that they supervise. In doing so, maybe you have a tool, maybe you have a different list of questions where you can identify, and those questions spark that interpersonal conversation, which you may not know. You'll find out your employees' motivations. You'll find out what entices them. Are they intrinsically motivated? Are they extrinsically motivated? What are the goals? How can you help them achieve some of those goals? All those things by articulating those messages to everybody that you work with, or as a leader to your division, to whoever is a CEO, whatever position you're in, but just articulating that message, even as a manager, or as a first team supervisor, whatever it is. Then next, you want to set the example. You have to lead by example. You can't say, I want everybody to go to these different resource groups, but you never show up yourself. You have to be able to practice and participate and really ingratiate yourself in it by setting that example. I know as leaders, we have a calendar full of meetings. I know it just pains us, but from time to time, monthly, weekly, or something, you set aside some time to really get into those different diversity programs that existed within your company, where you type up messages and you show what you're doing. You be transparent and you be vulnerable in that aspect. If you don't know something, ask.
When I've been in those diversity programs myself, I think what's really important as a leader sometimes is to stop being the leader in those moments. When you're on a ledger call, for instance, like when you're working out who owes you money, is probably the worst possible meeting you can go on. Then that's where you really have to take on that leadership. Like, who are we going to send the final demand to, and how are we going to get this kind of sorted out? You've got to take on the leadership capabilities there, because there's a crisis management. It's money coming in, but I think it's really important when you have those conversations. Because your ERGs, when you sit down, listen to people, you've got to be quite humble, and you've got to be more of the individual. You're more of the team member, haven't you? And I think if you have to listen a lot more than in those moments, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where you show up sometimes, and by following, you're actually leading, and showing, creating that allyship when you're not familiar with that group, or you may not identify with that group. Just showing leadership through actively listening, through just absorbing what the audience has to say, and then really taking that information and trying to implement whatever, if it's ideals or changes, trying to implement those within the framework of your organization, but also using those people that voice those ideals as resources and capital to be able to implement some of those strategies, because that's where the ideal came from. So also setting that example, giving credit to the people that actually came up with the ideal, and giving them an opportunity to expand upon it and be a part of that project, which would then build different tools and skill sets within them, as far as communication, soft skills, and everything else. So where they can now assume some of those leadership roles, or have the capability to be promoted and continue to advance their careers. And then what I'll say is, lastly, is you want to enforce and reinforce those measures. You want to make sure that through that inclusive leadership climate assessment and implementing that inclusive climate, you want to make sure you enforce and reinforce those standards. Continue to assess, continue to articulate, to continue to set the examples yourself. So that way, that permeates throughout the rest of your team, the rest of your organization. Again, from an individual standpoint, it's very important for us to be mindful of our practices. And at that point in time, you can start seeing the inclusive climate change within your organization. Knock on wood, right?
That's right. Well, one of the interesting things I've found as we've come back into the office a bit more, I think there are kind of, I don't know what you feel, is like I've found there's kind of pros and cons to it. I think sometimes in the kind of the office environment, you get the kind of the kind of the in jokes and the cliques, and certain people like certain people and sit next to certain people. Whereas when we're all working virtually, I don't think that happens so much. I don't think you get as much, laddish banter, to use a UK term, if you know what I mean. I don't know if you feel that yourself. If you do actually feel like sometimes the virtual workplace is is almost kind of a better place to foster diversity, because it just allows people to be themselves in their own home, if you know what I mean. I don't, have you got any
Yeah.
maybe some research on that where you've seen that kind of come back to the office, different problems arise? I don't know.
Yeah. So one of the statistics that alarmed me, or was alarming for me, was, and I can't remember what the exact numbers were, but it showed that women will be promoted less than men once we start heading back into the office, or once people start heading back into the office, because um, the water cooler, talk that you were talking about, the
Yeah.
banter, the group, and the cliques that form, all those things will be prevalent, and most of them are male oriented. And so
Led.
women
Yeah,
that
yeah,
choose to
yeah.
stay home and uh, be a part of the home lifestyle while they're continuing to do phenomenal work, they
Mm,
get left behind because of the networking aspect that they'll miss
mm,
out on, which we have to be aware of those type of statistics and those
yeah.
type of things, because that's where the bias creeps in, and we have to be able to circumvent that.
It's all about auditing and re-auditing, isn't it? It's about, well, what's changed? Because what
Yes.
was right in
Yep.
2021 might not be right in 22 or 23 or whatever, and things do change all the time, don't
Correct. Correct. And then, you know, there's positives as well, because from a mental standpoint, some people didn't like all the isolation. So going back
they?
into
No.
work gives them an opportunity to have that communication, that transactional communication with their colleagues, maybe express their different points of view, experience that multiculturalism. But then again, there are people are that are doing extremely well from a mental health aspect, working from home,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
those are things that we have to consider as organizations. Is that the best route for us to take for those people, in creating uh, that equity as far as work is concerned, and being able to choose your workplace so that way you can work the best to your ability. So those are things that we all have to consider.
No, I think it's definitely something that is. But I think what's important for me, like looking at this, is that it's obvious that in the last few years, this is something that's become so much more part of the the commercial conversation, right? You know, the people, companies, etc., are talking more about this. I do worry that it's not it, due to everything else that's kind of going on in the world. Now, there's so many more
Mhm.
worries and problems that everyone has got, cost of living, etc., which also affects different people of different backgrounds. But that
Uh,
maybe it's being pushed down a little bit, in terms of, that's dealt with. And I think it's really interesting what you're saying there, is that you have to keep thinking about this. You have to keep it front and center. You have to keep asking the questions and assessing. So we're thinking about cost of living, right? Cost of living, I'm sure, is a big
mhm.
thing in the US. It's definitely a big thing in Europe at the moment.
Yeah,
And we know that is probably affecting people from different backgrounds in a very different way, right? It's probably affecting leaders.
absolutely.
Fortunately for the leaders, slightly differently to the way it's affecting the people, like, to go back to
Hmm.
the agriculture in the fields, who really are struggling. And I guess that again changes the way diversity and inclusion is kind of looked at, because there's different pressures now, aren't
Yeah, you have to look at everything from all angles.
there?
Like you were talking about, leave no stone unturned. That second element of having that inclusive climate, which is, uh, or that first element, which is assessing, and then you cycle back and you reassess different things, because from a societal standpoint, we may not be impacted the same way other demographics or different identities may be impacted. The same
Mm.
thing that affects, as far as gender pay. If I'm a male, that's not going to impact me directly for an individual, but how does it impact my household? How does it impact
Yeah,
my partner? How does it impact Steve's mom, or
yeah, yeah,
his little sister, or those things matter when we're looking at it from a individual standpoint. How does it impact those around us or people that we work with? If it LGBTQIAPK plus rights, or how are people being impacted from a societal standpoint where they can't separate that from work? If me and my partner were looking to get married and you're not allowing marriages in my state, how does that impact me from being able to perform at my peak at work? And so again, one of the things that, just going to the meaning of my name, Maktub, or my name, Maktub Limitless. Maktub is Arabic for it is written. So we're saying it is written for us to be limitless. And in doing so, we can reach our maximum potential according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of have that self-actualization. That can come in many different forms. That can come spiritually, that can come personally, professionally, but self-actualization, we want people to be able to reach that in a professional environment. How do we do that? We assess and we continue to have those inclusive climates that can really bring that greatest potential out in us as individuals. Like you said, just making sure that we're constantly assessing our environment, listening to the voices of our people, staying aware and apprised through our different ERGs that we may have, through our diversity committees. If we don't have one, building those things, being aware of what would best suit our organization, but also the individuals, being mindful in our practices. All those things matter when we come to really having that diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ensuring that it's for everyone and not just a group of people.
So looking forward to the year ahead, obviously we're at the end of 2022. Probably, I would say, not been the best of years. Let's hope for the 23 is a better year, because the 20 so far has been pretty dire overall. But no, there's been good moments as well. But,
depends on your perspective too.
Oh well, yeah, it depends on your perspective. I guess yes. I kind of, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, my overall kind of impression of the last kind of 3 years has been, is this really happening? I can't believe, yes. Yeah. If you'd predicted this in 2019, I would have said, no thanks, I'll skip to the 2030s, really. But hey, I think we're all learning stuff and we're all moving forward. But, as well as staying kind of safe and well, and hopefully things kind of improve for culture and societies. But what are your main priorities for your business in the next year?
To see. And when I say to see, I use that as an acronym, SEE. To continue to serve. I think we all provide service in some capacity. And whether you're CEO, fry cook, frontline engineer, whatever it is, you serve in some capacity. And for us, we want to be able to serve different organizations and different communities in a way where we can really start seeing impact and change. And that leads into the E, which is to enlighten. So again, serving those communities in ways that are best practices, that do empower and inspire your people to be able to perform and feel at their best, to be able to really spread messages of unity as opposed to division, all those things as far as enlighten. And then lastly is E, is excel. It's in our name. Maktub Limitless. We want people to excel and be the best version of themselves as possible, so that way it can permeate again throughout the organization and really impact everyone. And you can see and feel that change, because energy is palpable. We feel it. We walk into a room, if everybody's saying hi to each other, we're more likely to engage in that activity and be part of the conversation. But hi with joy and smiles and being jovial on top of that. Not saying it's always going to be applicable, of course, but if we have that environment, then it bring out the best and unify us in that aspect. So just continue to excel, be our best individual selves, and create opportunities for that to be prevalent within our organizations. So that's what we look forward to for the next year.
Fantastic. Well,
it's to
serve, enlighten, excel, see. I like that very much.
Yes,
Yeah, I was
indeed.
excited to see what the last E was there.
Thank
So yeah, and
you.
you know, from
Yeah.
your side, when you go into organisations that either excelling and doing well, and you look at the leaders, do you think that attitude kind of emanates from the best leaders, that you can kind of see that level of seeing, with the people that are running the most successful businesses? Do you think it's linked?
I think it depends on the level, and it depends on uh, what their mission or intent is at that time.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
let's be honest, everyone isn't in it for the right purposes. Some people want to do it for performative actions, to check a
yeah, yeah.
box, as we talked about earlier.
Mm.
And then others, they are really about change. They are about that life. They want to be able to see their organizations prosper, see their people flourish, see them in great mental health standards when it comes to work, see that they're being able to put forth the equitable opportunities for everyone, ensuring that accessibility is there for both mentally and physically disabled individuals. And so having the big spectrum of
Mm.
that amount of leadership, it just shows that there's so much that can be done within this practice, within our various industries, within our organizations, that we always have some room for improvement. And one of the things is DEI,
Mm.
that we all can continue to improve upon. It's just like your technology. You're not going to stop growing. You're not going to stop trying to make your product better. And neither should you stop trying to make your environment better and more productive and more psychologically safe for all your employees and inclusive for all.
Brilliant. Well, JaJuan, it's been a great speech today. Thank you very much for your time. I've learned a lot today. There's been a really good session. I think, yeah, brilliant. And I will also say, if you've got the video, I really, really like your buttonhole as well, my friend. That's the flower there. Is that
Oh,
the flower got
thank you.
meaning, or is this?
Yeah, it's a
Obviously, if you
lapel.
just listen on the audio, you
Yeah,
won't be able to see
it's
it. But
leather.
yeah, it's very impressive. I've been
Yeah.
looking at it. I've been looking at it with envy all the way through. So yeah, I think I need to
A
up
little
my
razzle
game in
dazzle.
terms of yeah, good stuff. But it's been great speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time. Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, and best of luck for
Yeah.
2023. So thank you.
Same to you, and it's been a pleasure being here. I appreciate it. Thank you.